Here's another little story of the Little Rebel of the Gap in Cumberland Gap. This is an old story of back during the Depression, the hard times they had and he had growing up. Now the first thing, you got to understand, what is Cumberland Gap? If you don't know, I'm going to try to explain it to you. It's where 3 states come together: Tennessee, Kentucky, and Virginia. Not hard to find on a map. And it's got some old history here. Here's an old mill and an old inn. This is the old depot they redone in the Gap with all of its historical landmarks here. And it's part of the Cumberland Gap National Park. Beautiful place. A lot of history passed through here. This is the old Gap Creek that comes out of Cumberland Mountain. Same temperature about year round, no matter what time of year it is. It's such a beautiful place here, all the landmarks. And it comes out of this mountain here right above, Cumberland Mountain. Right on top of it is a place called the Pinnacle Overlook. Beautiful place. And from the top looking down, this is Cumberland Gap. This is what it looks like nowadays. And this is all history because of the Wilderness Road. There's the views from it. That's Fern Lake on the Kentucky side. Beautiful country here. And in the wintertime, oh my goodness, it's breathtaking. This is the same view in the wintertime when there's snow. And the mountain itself, such a grandeur to behold. If you've never seen it, it's a place to see. But I'm going to take you back to a time back during the Depression, when people had hard times in these mountains, and this place was no different. So I'm going to take you back to the Depression to tell this little Christmas story. Now here's a picture of back in the 30s, 20 years before it became a national park. And a lot of little places had tourist attractions here, but there was nothing special. And my dad, he was the little rebel of the Gap, and he growed up in a little place outside the Gap here called Tipple, a little community. Just a little poor community that the railroad tracks run through. Now here's what it looks like from the Tipple looking back towards the Gap. Just a poor little farming community, people having a hard time making a living. Now he was one of 5 brothers, the youngest of the brothers, and he had 5 sisters, so there was a total of 10 of them altogether. And his dad, my grandpa, he died in the logwoods back before he became a teenager. So they had a hard time with 10 kids, really hard time. So they had to go to work best they could to support their mom. Now he was too young to work anywhere, so he was not too young enough to work on farms. So he done what he could to make a few cents here and there, a quarter. In the summer, it was pretty good. And he worked around town when he could find little odd jobs, but it was hard because everybody else was trying to find these little jobs too. So you had to scratch and hustle to make a penny or two. And he went to a little school here in the Gap that looked something like this. This is not the actual school, but the school's still there. They made it into the police department nowadays, City Hall. And what he really loved to do to help put food on the table is he learned to hunt from his older brothers. But his older brothers, it was just before World War II, so they went into the military, 2 or 3 of them did. And they barely could just supplement the food with wild game, what he could. Old pan of taters, and a big old pot of soup beans on the stove. And come Christmas, he know they didn't have no money. But his brothers and sisters, they wanted a little Christmas tree, so they go up along the railroad tracks and cut an old cedar tree. Looks something like this, string it up with old popcorn, whatever they could find, because they couldn't afford nothing. And he could tell me in the wintertime when them old bad winter storms come roaring up that valley, up Tipple, how windy it was, how cold it was. But they kept a big old fire going in the house. One end of the house was kind of toasty and warm, where they'd try to sleep on the floor, all of them, because on the other end of the house, the wind blowing so hard, there would be snow blowing through the walls. He'd tell me that. But it looked so beautiful. The next day, looking down the valley, all this beautiful snow. But he always told me he couldn't stand wintertime because he couldn't find no work, and you couldn't find nothing to work with. Everything was covered up with snow. And the game was really hard to find too. Of course, game was scarce anyway. Everybody else was living off of it too. And he would go to school walking down railroad tracks out of Tipple towards the Gap. It wasn't less than a half a mile away, I guess. He'd walk to school every day. They had school no matter what was going on. And he remembered talking a lot of times here at the old tunnel at the Gap. Them old coal cars coming out of Kentucky would scrape coal off them cars coming through that tunnel, and he'd pick up coal for the stove at home. And at school, little old schoolhouse like this, and when it got Christmas time, the teacher would usually let the boys draw names with the girls so they could exchange gifts. But that worried him to death because he knowed he didn't have nothing. Well, he thought, but one of his brothers come in from the military before the war got started and brought Mom a bunch of stuff. He was in the Army. He brought her some little stuff and kept put stuff on the table just to help support the family. And he brought a case of old field ration Hershey bars for the family. Well, he said, there's what I'm going to give her. That's what I'm going to do on my school, drawing names. It was cold. Time he got it to school, it was froze solid. So he thought he'd put it on this old boiler radiator and let it warm up so he could change it. Well, as time went on during the day, he kind of forgot about it. And it stayed toasty and warm in there, he said. But when he went to get it, it had melted down through the radiator, just running out of the package. Well, she didn't like that. She was mad. But he was still sweet on her, but she would never forgive him for that one. But the teacher made everybody happy. They got every one of them, he said, a little bag of rock candy. And he took that home to his brothers and sisters. He didn't have much left, he said, but he shared it with everybody he had. So there you go. He always told me when he was growing up, he had no bad luck, he'd have no luck at all. But he made it, he survived, and he became a good man growing up. So I hope you enjoy these little stories of the little rebel of the Gap. He told me so many little stories. He's gone now, but I'll see him again. So I want to thank you for watching. Y'all have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. So God bless. I'll see you next time.